You're listening to the Sustainable Angler Podcast. I'm your host, Rick Crawford. In this episode, I interview Flood Tide Company founder and artist Paul Puckett, and we dive into everything from his recent trip to the Seychelles to some of the pretty amazing things that Flood Tide's doing on the sustainability front. So, hope you enjoy. This episode of The Sustainable Angler is brought to you by Emerger Strategies, guiding businesses on their sustainability journey towards zero waste and carbon neutrality. Use your business to save the planet. All right, so welcome to the Sustainable Angler Podcast, recorded live at the Flood Tide Co.
Oh, yeah, they love that, Rick.
They do love that, don't they? Recorded live at the Flood Tide Co. laboratories. I'm here with Flood Tide's. What are we? Artist in resident, owner, co-founder?
I don't even know anymore, honestly.
Mr. Paul Puckett. Thank you for joining.
Thank you. Appreciate that. It's good to be here. Thanks for asking me to be on.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's about time. But anyway,
well, hey, I we were talking the other day, and if you're not totally over talking about the trip to the Seychelles, give me a little, give the kids a little something. Give them what they want.
It's actually still heavily on my mind. I probably think about 13 times a day.
Give or take.
Yeah, I mean it's one of those places that I never thought I'd ever go to. You see, in this world of fly fishing and adventure and travel, you see a lot of these people going to these places, and I don't know, it's one of those things I never thought I would do. And because of a good friend of mine in Houston, Garrett Gordy, he took a group, and there was an open spot, and I was able to go on that spot. So because of his unselfishness, I guess is the best word,
Yeah.
I was able to go. So amazing place, long way to get there, but totally worth it. When I was on the way back, I was sitting there thinking to myself, man, I would not want to do this for another 4 or 5 years. But if you asked me to go tomorrow, I would do it in a heartbeat. It's everything it's advertised. The guides are amazing. We were on Cosmolito, which normally would be a mothership boat, but this is the first year they have an on-island, on Wizard Island, which is one of the little pieces of the atoll. They have an eco camp, which essentially is storage containers that they've turned into little cottages.
Nice.
So I don't really know what makes it eco camp. I mean, I guess everything is sustainable on that island. Like they make their own water they desalinate the water.
Yeah, reverse osmosis.
Yeah.
There you go.
I've been wanting to know how the hell they do it. I know that every glass of water they told me is worth $3 to $4.
Yeah.
So that's why they don't have alcohol included on the trip, because basically every time you drink water, you're drinking your alcohol. So them charging $7 for a beer really is a pretty good deal.
Right. But,
honestly, beer and alcohol wasn't the thing you think of first. You think of water at all times. I mean, just to get into it, I don't think I peed for like 2.5 days being there, honestly. It was crazy how much water you drink. And also they say you drink double the amount of water because the water there doesn't have any minerals and electrolytes in it because they're getting it out of the salt. So I was totally fascinated by how much water I was drinking and how that whole process worked. And then you start thinking, this is really salt water and there's no electrolytes or minerals in it, but it still tastes so damn good. But anyway, so that was cool, and the meals were unbelievable. They have a kitchen staff there, a married couple from South Africa. So everything was top notch. Mm-hmm. You're thinking you're in the middle of nowhere on a little island. It's already going to be awesome, even if I had to like sleep under the stars on a cot. But everything past that was incredible.
So,
and the fishing was amazing.
Yeah, and so how about the journey to get there? Because that's something that I didn't know. Mm-hmm. It's like you can go a couple of different ways, but long story short, once you get to the Seychelles, you've still got a little way.
Yeah, it's probably the equivalent. I don't have a map to scale it out, but it's probably the equivalent of flying to Bozeman and still needing to get to Key West. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
You still have to fly a 5-hour flight. No, I'm sorry. I'm getting that reversed. From Dubai, you still had to fly 5 hours to Mahe.
Yeah.
So that's probably like flying from L.A. to New York.
Yeah.
And then 2 1 hour and 15-minute pedal jump flights, which is probably from, New York to Charleston.
Yeah.
And then an hour and a half boat ride, which is probably like getting to Savannah.
So, I mean, this is super remote.
Yeah, and that's not counting the flight from Houston to Dubai. I mean, it's just... And then you start thinking you're just like this tiny speck of sand out in the Indian Ocean. Like, it's already uncomfortable if you're out in the middle of the Atlantic or Pacific, but you're like in a whole world away. And the closest reference you can think is Madagascar. How many times have you thought in your life I'd be close to Madagascar or Africa? I mean,
right.
So, and then, it's just, and the fishing was unbelievable. So many different species. I didn't catch a lot of the guys during the wrong tides of catching GTs or permit or bones or triggers. They would go do what's called dredging. And you can see the coral heads 10 to 12 feet down, sometimes even 20 to 30 feet down, and they'd put a big egg weight on their fly line and just see what kind of species you get. I mean, there's a whole arsenal of like grouper, wrasse, Napoleon wrasse, the crazy stuff. I mean, it looks like a crazy artist like Jackson Pollock just went and covered these fish with paint and just did what it's some of the pictures I've shown you.
Yeah.
These bright red fish. It's amazing to think that that's under the ocean.
Yeah.
It's just, anyway, so all that stuff, and then you combine that with GT fishing, triggerfish fishing. The milks came into play too. The huge bonefish. I found myself looking for permit, and you would just have these schools of, 5 to 20 bonefish, all 5 to 12 pounds, letting them swim by you and purposely saying, no, I'm not going to cast it because I'm looking for a permit. And then they go by, you're sitting there thinking, well, next week I'm going to be back in Charleston, wondering why the hell I didn't just cast that bonefish. But the one time I did, I catch this bonefish, have one for 3 or 4 minutes, all of a sudden the guy goes, permit coming. So Garrett casted this permit, had a pretty good shot on it, but I had to corral that bonefish by the boat as good as possible. Then I was thinking, well, that might actually excite the fish. You never know. Sometimes when you have a fish on and it's dancing around, it sometimes doesn't hurt to have that. Right. But anyway, permit with fishing was tough. There weren't a lot of permits, but man, that GT was incredible. Yeah, the big boy, the big girl, whatever
it was,
whatever it is. Yeah, I know it was on a flat that it wasn't supposed to be. They say that typically you don't catch an 80 to 100 pound GT on a flat. That's typically like a surf type thing. We were in 2 to 3 feet of water.
That's unreal.
So it was incredible. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned, look like Jackson Pollock had painting something. So I'm gonna take the leap here and talk a little bit about how did you get into your art, and just how did that whole world open up for you?
Yeah, I'd have to say I've always, when you're a kid, every kid goes to art class. You always draw all through elementary school. Half your activities you do are drawing or pasting or cutting. You're always doing art stuff. I think it's one of those things I just stuck to where other kids lose interest in it. So I've been doing art as long as you basically have been doing art when you were a little kid, but I just kept doing it and kept finding interest in it. And then in high school is when I started really getting into fishing. I've been fishing ever since I was a little kid with my granddad, like everyone has. And I started combining all my art project subject matter to fishing. I just remember always walking in our baseball locker room. I always had some painting I was working on because you had to go home with it and work on it. And I remember the guys would always be making fun of me. Oh, he's an artist, yeah. I mean, typical jocks in the baseball room. And when they started seeing that there were bass and trout, they're like, oh, that's pretty cool, man. And remember one time I had a Jimi Hendrix project I was working on. So I was basically good at two things, baseball and art in high school is what it comes down to. My dad was a science teacher, so I think it bothered him a lot that I wasn't worth a shit. And I don't know if I can say that. Math and science. But yeah, I just kept doing it in college. The plan was to do graphic design because that's basically a way you can do art and also get a job.
Right.
And somehow I finally finished college, and then I went to Wyoming, Jackson, which you're familiar with. And my dad, I finally finished school. He's like, I can't believe you're finally finished school and you're going to fish. You're going to go fishing. I go, yeah, I'm doing it because I worked for West Bank Anglers all through college in Dallas.
Okay.
So it naturally happened where I moved to the one in Wyoming. I was going to guide, and I learned how salty and crusty those guides can get. And I didn't want to do that because I was getting 3 days off. I was able to fish whenever I wanted to, and that's kind of how that all evolved. And actually in Jackson, I didn't paint much at all, which is crazy. I fished and skied and partied, basically.
Yeah.
So I remember I worked on
Familiar with that lifestyle in Jackson.
In the winter, you're just a sloth. It's like just dark and dreary and cold. You're either worried about skiing or someone's house party. And I just didn't paint much. And when I left it and moved back to Atlanta, I moved to Atlanta from Dallas, Texas originally. Moved to Atlanta and just realized that I've missed it for 4 years. And started working in a fly shop again and started my painting career there and just figured I would give it 10 years. And I think I'm in year 15.
Yeah.
I'm feeling all right about it.
Yeah, it worked out.
Yeah.
Well, obviously your art and getting back into, I guess you never got out of fly fishing, but the move to Atlanta, picking up your art, how did that transition lead you into starting Flood Tide Company, or what's the backstory? How
my whole back fishing story is, is mainly freshwater. Bass fishing in Texas, striper fishing in Texas, going to the coast a little bit. I didn't really have a whole lot of knowledge about it. And then they stocked trout in Texas, so I'd go trout fishing. And then Arkansas, I found Arkansas, White River in Arkansas. So I would go to White River in Arkansas 2 or 3 times a year with my buddies, my dad. And that's where this is it for me. This trout fly fishing is it for me. So the second I could get out of there, I moved to Wyoming. Went out there and caught as many damn fish as I could. And then moved to Atlanta, and Atlanta is actually a great fishing town. I mean, you've got the Chattahoochee, which has wild trout. Mm-hmm. Then they have, as you move down the river, you got stock trout and wild trout. And then you have just stock trout. Then you have stripers. You have red-eye bass, and you have trout in the mountains. You have the Flint River, which has an amazing fishery. And then you got the coast 3.5 hours away.
Yeah.
So with all that in mind, I started going to the Georgia coast a lot, and I was like, okay, saltwater, this is it. Like, forget trout fishing. I'm now catching fish that can be eaten by other fish.
Right.
Like,
right.
And just the whole thing with the mystery of the tides, the weather, it's never perfect. And I started going and also I started coming to Charleston a lot for Seaweed to do my art show.
Oh, right.
So I fell in love with Charleston, and I fell in love with like Sullivan's Island, and all I wanted to do, I was so addicted to just catching a redfish. And it took me a long time to do it because every time I'd go down there, the weather would be crappy or the tides weren't right. So I just totally got addicted to it. And I was like, I was also doing a lot of designs for the companies, True Flies. I did some stuff for Patagonia, Sims, and I'm missing one. I can't think. I did some stuff for Yeti too.
Yeah.
And so I found these companies like wanting my artwork. And I was like, why wouldn't I just start my own deal?
Yep.
And do stuff for them? So the whole idea, and I came up with this logo because I had redfish on my mind, Flood Tide Company, because I would only go down the coast when there was a flood tide. Mm-hmm. And I loved redfish, so I just, simply put a redfish tail on top of Flood Tide Co. Nothing too extravagant, but it seemed to stick. And then Will Abbott kind of came around to me and was like, man, let me help you get this thing going. And then next thing you know, we have a apparel company. At first, it was just kind of goofing around with Johnny Cash holding a fish, Walter from Big Lebowski. It wasn't really ever a plan to have anything like this.
Right.
And next thing you know, we're selling this stuff, in a closet. And, then I get an attic, little studio with inventory. And it's just next thing you know, we have this place in West Ashley. So,
were you actually printing shirts in
the
attic?
No. We've never actually printed.
Gotcha.
If you know
all the design work.
Yeah, if you know anything about screen printing, it's a whole nother operation.
Gotcha. Well, that's interesting. So from the attics to this live studio audience, and
are you?
There they are.
There they are. We found them. They're really enjoying this, by the way.
They are. I think you get it. Whoa, there it is.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks.
Yeah, there you go.
So you get Flood Tide off the ground. You've got this new great location in West Ashley, and just curious also about at what point did y'all decide, hey, we'd like to sort of, at what point did you make the decision you wanted to protect what you love and looked into becoming 1% for the Planet members and how'd that work out?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you. Like, I've never been on the forefront of that kind of thinking. It's not that I'm against it by any means, obviously not, because we're working with you, and now it's a big part of our scope and our vision. But I was so distracted by literally coming up with designs, figuring out the next shirt, blah, 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 this, that, and I knew it was something that at the time I figured other people will deal with it. They'll be the ones that help out the planet and do all that stuff. And then Will told me one day, man, I got this guy, Rick Crawford. He won't leave me alone, man. We got to call him. We'll go have lunch with him, just have him come over. Something about the planet and something about this. And I was like, all right. And Will just hates the word consultant, So he's like, he's a consultant. So along came you, and you came and met with us, and you had this whole packet and this plan. And that was honestly the first day that I wouldn't say the light turned on that day, but it was like, oh, this is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And the more, I think by the third or fourth time you came, and then Lawson, it totally turned on for Lawson, because Lawson was already kind of totally into it. So he was real intrigued with you and what you were bringing to the table. And since then, it's been just you helping us with that stuff, and you shedding the light on all this stuff and all these different resources here in Charleston, and then past that 1% for the planet and so on. And I was intrigued with it like probably 5 or 6 years ago with my art. I thought about creating that, but I was like, man, I need every 1% I can get right now for being an artist. So it just never really happened for me. I looked into it, but it's just one of those things that I'm glad we're involved with it now, because not only is it something we need to do and everyone should try to do, but it also just helps the business. It just creates a good story.
Yeah.
And I think at the end of the day, it helps your bottom line.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and it's pretty cool. Y'all. And I know this obviously firsthand, but it's really cool what y'all been able to do to help out Charleston Waterkeeper here. They're a local nonprofit, and they do all sorts of amazing work, from trash cleanups to, I mean, it's pretty unbelievable. They're really short staffed, and so the money that Flood Tide writes, strokes the check for them every year, but also the amount of volunteer hours that y'all put in and cleanups, but also, which is really cool, is oyster reef restoration projects. So for those of you, basically 90% of the oysters on the East Coast are in decline. Like, it's basically been 90% depleted. And so whenever you have oyster roast, they have a program with the South Carolina DNR where you can recycle those shells. So, for example, Flood Tide had an oyster roast a couple months ago. We recycle those shells, and then that'll go to create new oyster reefs, because the oyster spat need the oyster. You can't keep taking the shells out, because basically the baby oysters have nothing to attach to. Mm-hmm. So really cool that, basically through your business, you're helping to improve our fishery, which makes total sense for a fishing brand. And so anyway, it's just really cool to see. And I know that working with Charleston Waterkeeper on some other projects, they're really grateful. And I know y'all have done some other stuff too with Galveston Bay Foundation and
oh yeah, like that. Yeah. That was last year after we do that. Our big event every year is the Taylor's Ball, which proceeds from the Taylor's Ball go to whatever benefit we're working with, which is now Charleston Waterkeeper.
Yeah.
I think that year we did the Galveston Bay Foundation, just because it was right after that hurricane.
Yeah. And
we were trying to kind of help them get everything kind of relined and resorted out. And I think we sent them $10,000, which is so cool.
Yeah. It's unreal.
It feels pretty cool to write a check for $10,000 that it's going to somewhere that totally needs it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean, it's making a positive impact. And I think that's what the 1% for the planet just sort of points you on that path, and then it's just kind of like no looking back. You're like, yeah, why would we not keep doing this?
Yeah.
All right, so shift gears a little bit. I see these things on the interwebs.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. What is sprummer?
Sprummer. Well, it's what you call your line when your stuff's coming out a little bit later than normal.
Okay.
Usually it's a spring. Usually it's a spring launch.
Yeah.
Well, we try to find ways to cover up our inadequacies by saying, let's call it Sprummer. And it's funny anyway. Like, I'd rather call it that anyway because it's a spring-summer line. And that's, we're going with it. We're going to start calling it Sprummer every season. And I think it's kind of funny anyway. And also, we've changed up the line a little bit this year. Typically, we've just used cotton and in a shirt. It's a tri-blend in general in the industry. It's 3 parts, different materials, and one of those materials is typically polyester.
Yeah.
Well, this year we're using recycled polyester with a fabric called Repreve.
Yep.
And essentially, you're getting out of that one shirt in that 35% polyester, I think is what it is. You're getting 4 to 5 recycled water bottles.
Yeah.
So that was a huge part of kind of the delay.
Yeah.
Because we decided kind of last minute to do it. And it's something that's changed our story and changed the way we're thinking. And our cotton shirts that we're about to come out with, which are going to be 50% cotton, 50% Repreve.
Yep.
As well. So, and then next fall we're going to sun shirts that are all Repreve.
Awesome.
So essentially, all of our products, probably except for hats, because I don't really think that's possible yet. It might be possible in the future. Are going to have some sort of sustainability story within that product.
Yeah, which is really cool. I mean, the Repreve fabric, so they're taking plastic bottles that would otherwise end up in a landfill. And they're recycling them, turning them into they melt them down, turn them into these pellets that I guess they melt again. I guess it's the process, and they turn them into fiber, and now they're making shirts out of it. And I know that with y'all's cotton shirts, y'all are now USA grown cotton, I think, and made in USA.
Yeah, I think they're made up in North Carolina.
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of a supply chain footprint, it's pretty small because you're manufacturing in North Carolina. You're growing the cotton in the Carolinas, I believe. So.
Oh, they like that.
Oh, they like that, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. So really cool that y'all are further authenticating that it's great to be a 1% for the Planet member, but how do we start to embed sustainability into our sales and marketing? And from my experience, that is where most businesses fail and drop the ball on sustainability. Is they think it's a good idea and they're like, okay, yeah, sure, we'll give it a try, and they kind of half-ass it, and then they don't really see results, and so it just kind of sizzles away. But what we've seen, and me working with Flood Tide, is you actually do see a reduction in your operational costs through like energy efficiency. And then if you market a story like 1% for the Planet or Repreve, that increases your top line growth, which is sales. So that's sort of the secret sustainability sauce for brands that get it, is to embed that into your sales and marketing, because there's a growing number of conscious consumers that are looking to support brands that align with their values. And y'all have done, I think, an amazing job of staying authentic to who you are as a brand, but also, being willing to put yourself out there to say, well, yeah, we do give a damn. And, this is just part of, what we feel is the right thing to do. And, that's the way it is.
Well, what's great, obviously, with your help on all that, but what's crazy is it's not really that hard.
Yeah. It's pretty easy,
Like,
right?
you make a couple decisions, and, yeah, it's a little bit more expensive, but it doesn't really affect the end consumer that much, like, as far as the price goes. But it's just, why wouldn't you? Like,
Yeah.
Not even the Repreve side. Like, it's great that it's made in the USA. And then a bonus is the fact that we're keeping some of those plastic bottles off water and land by throwing them in the shirt.
Yep.
Now, obviously, someone has to go out and do the manpower and the work to get those bottles and to get that trash and get that recyclable. But at the end of the day, it's really not that hard to make the decision to do that.
Yeah, and what's also super cool, and again makes total sense for any outdoor apparel brand, is that they're basically estimating, not to be Debbie Downer about it, but it's just what they estimate, that there'll be more plastic by weight than fish in the ocean by 2050, which is crazy. So y'all are on, I think the forefront of what we're going to see every other brand follow suit in the next 10 years is because there's an abundance of plastic that nobody knows what to do with.
Yeah, and especially a lot of these technical shirts, a lot of them are made from polyester.
Right.
And it's a breathable material, and hopefully going forward you're going to see more, technical fishing shirts and that sort of thing, and a lot more products being made from that mindset.
Yeah, and that was something I was going to ask you about too. I mean, what's on the?
Sorry, I'm sipping my Starbucks. Hold on, right?
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah. So you got the Sprummer, you got some stuff coming out with fall. Anything else that you want to let the people in on that maybe on the horizon? You said some technical fishing shirts, maybe.
Hopefully next spring. Yeah, that's the next plan. We're going to start. Broadening our product diversity. Right now, it's pretty much T-shirts and hats for the most part, because it comes from an art story. So T-shirts are the best way to deliver that message.
Yeah.
But we want to start having more lifestyle shirts, button downs. We're going to have some shorts. Our shorts are coming back in June.
Nice.
The Hunley 2.0 featuring the crab embroidery. But yeah, so we're going to have hopefully starting in June, just a slow roll of more diverse products. Cool. I mean, that's, at this point, I want to do that. Like, I'm not saying I'm bored with being a T-shirt and hat company, but it's exciting to think that we could be more of a lifestyle brand with those type of things.
Yep. Well, that's awesome.
Yeah. I think you're awesome.
Yeah. No. You stop. You stop. All right. Well, so we'll wrap things up a little bit, but I'm going to do a speed round here, here before we go. So, rapid fire favorite saltwater fish on fly.
Man, it's hard to get that GT out of my mind, but that's just not realistic. I could, that's like saying the pot of the gold at the end of the rainbow is like your favorite place to hang out. It just can't, may not ever happen again for me.
Right.
So I'd still have to default to the permit.
The permit.
He can drive me crazy the rest of my life, and I'm still I love them.
Wait, speaking of which, I just thought about this. So maybe not rapid fire. Aren't you going down to Mexico soon?
In 2 weeks from Friday, we do a trip every year to Palomino Club.
Okay, cool.
Ryan Griffin and I
kind
of host it, and it's such a cool place. So yeah, Dick and Kay aren't involved anymore, our friends, but it's owned by a new guy, and I heard it's going to be even bigger. Not bigger; it's only going to be the size it is, but better. It's just great place.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. What about favorite freshwater species on fly?
Brown trout.
Brown trout, done.
I mean, that fish could be a saltwater fish. It's just so aggressive. It hunts at night. It does everything you want a fish to do, and it eats little dry flies. Okay. It eats meat. It's huge, so it's great.
So are those also for your salt and freshwater fish species? Are those also your favorite to paint?
My favorite to paint is probably a tarpon.
Tarpon.
Yeah, it's just it has these cool lines. So it's like a robot. It's like this prehistoric creature. It's just such a cool, and they're usually flying out of the water.
Yeah.
So, tarpon's probably my favorite thing to paint.
Nice. All right. You have one fly to rule them all. And fresh or salt water, it was just you're the last person on Earth, and you've got one fly to use.
Well, considering I've already done it, the Everglades Special.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Because I did it for a full year with just one fly, and I caught like 24 species.
Nice.
I didn't catch a permit on it, but yeah, Everglades Special by far.
Everglades Special.
Yeah.
Nice.
I'm like, that's an easy answer.
Yeah.
I'm sitting over here just waiting for you to finish the question.
Just go ahead. Just ask me. Ask me.
Everglades Special.
You ask me that question, I'll tell you.
I think you can look it up on Vimeo. It's like
I completely forgot.
Well, what's funny is I sent the movie one time to I forget who it was at Orvis, but they had like every Friday they'd have like a little movie best of film, and I sent it to him. He's like, Paul, it's a little long. It was like 30 minutes. I was like, man, it's a whole year. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I caught
condensed a year down to 30 minutes. That's pretty damn good.
Yeah, but you can look it up. A year of the Everglades special. I mean, I find it pretty entertaining.
Yeah.
But hey.
Well, I'm sure you do.
I'm kind of biased. So, yeah, there you go.
Awesome. Well, Paul, I appreciate you carving some time out for me. Always good to catch up, and really stoked to hear about all the good stuff happening over here at Flood Tide. Is the new Sprummer stuff up online? Is that
half of it is. I think we're getting the rest of the stuff in like a week and a half, 2 weeks.
Okay. So visit floodtide.com, I guess, for anyone who wants to go and make a purchase. 1% of your sale will go to an environmental nonprofit like Charleston Waterkeeper, and you'll also be able to. I was on your website doing a little research, and I know that y'all have got a little green plastic bottle next to shirts that have the recycled plastic bottles in them. So if you want to support a brand doing the right thing with some amazing designs, head over to floodtide.com.
Rick, thanks for what you do, buddy.
Yeah, you betcha.
You're the man.
You betcha. There they are. Yeah. It's, damn it.
Thanks again. I appreciate it, though. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. We'll see you, man.
Thanks for listening to the Sustainable Angler Podcast. If you'd like to listen to more, you can find us on SoundCloud, Spotify, Stitcher, and iTunes.